Construction makers.
So a lot of times when we're analyzing a system, we look at the extremes, right? We think about what is the ultimate conclusion if players are optimizing the fun out of the game, right? Where do they end up by trying to do that? And in Commander, when we look at some of the best commanders themselves, right? We look to CEDH and we look at, okay, well, what's at the highest end of the most extreme of the system? And we see commanders like Kinnan, we see commanders like Tivit, we see Timna Krom, Thrasios. What all these commanders seem to have in common are one or more of three things. And that's they either give you mana advantage, they give you card advantage, or they're a win condition. So we thought we'd talk about why that's the case, and I guess more broadly speaking, what we can learn from that dynamic emerging.
So this is something that we've talked about a lot. It's something I think now at this point we're probably going to have 2 videos on it, but something we called the 8th card problem, which is essentially having direct access to a card in any sort of a game. In Commander Magic, you can go and grab a commander card, but there's other games that you have just, some sort of a general character that you can activate an ability consistently, or it is acting as a creature or a spell or something. That increases the consistency of the game by a lot, but if that function fulfills one of these 3 things, then it usually is a good indicator that it might have some competitive viability.
So why are we seeing this phenomenon emerge, right? Like why specifically are these the criteria, right? It's that these are really the things that move you towards winning the game, right? It's that getting some kind of mana advantage, some kind of card advantage, or at literally being a win condition. And the reason why this is so prevalent is because this card is the card that you always have access to. So you can build your deck knowing that that's always there. And so we see some strategies like Timna Krom play multiple sources of card draw. Timna and Krom are both card draw engines. And they build the deck around that idea that they're trying to gain a lot of card draw, they're investing in their economy, and they're trying to win the game longer, right? Yeah. CEDH players refer to this as mid-range hell, which I think is like kind of a misnomer considering like we're really going long game at this point.
Yeah. I think I described it as it's actually late game.
Right. Yeah. It's like it's past the time limit of the game substantially. But when we look at something like Rograkh is built in a way that is aimed at getting quick mana advantage to try to win the game early. They had some tools to do that got banned, like Dockside, but whatever. But we can sort of see these different play patterns emerging based on this one particular card that you always have access to.
Right. I mean, if your overall strategy generally when you're making a deck fulfills either this sort of economy or defense or rush, etc., then it only makes sense for you to make sure that the card that you're guaranteed access to is also going to be fulfilling that strategy. Tactically, it doesn't create a lot of diversity in gameplay, but generally that's not really most people's concern, especially in CEDH levels where you don't really care, and you're just trying to build up to
you're trying to be as
combo.
consistent as possible.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if, generally speaking, the ones that give you card advantage specifically end up just being better, and this might just be why Timna Krom is the best deck.
I certainly think it does when like Rush right now, like you said, doesn't have a lot of support. The intended design of Rush is almost always usually through combat damage. There's other cases like Infect and stuff like that kind of with poison counters. That
I mean, really, like if you wanted to do the math on it, Infect is still the same as combat damage, but you're just doing twice as much because you need to do half as much. Yeah, whatever.
But I think that like, we could look at something like Braid's Cabal Minion, right? As a commander that's like, well, that may be kind of considered as almost like a rush strategy of just trying to get your commander out to like lock people out of the game in a way.
Yeah.
And then you're just kind of, I guess you could just ping them with braids or whatever until the end of the game. But it's not super common because of lots of reasons, primarily because of the high quality cards that are available to everybody. And I think probably because of partners.
Yeah. Partners play a substantial role here in terms of the, you don't just get an 8th card in your hand. You also get a 9th. And
depending on the mana that you draw, you can get the other one.
Right. Well, and I think that like, partners might be okay if they're both single colors, because you're still like at least limiting your deck to 2 colors at that point, but playing two partners. I still think it's problematic though. Like having access to even more cards outside of the cards that are in your deck is problematic, especially because it leads to homogeneous play patterns. But again, that's why these cards end up doing one of these three things, right? These are the things that win you the game based on whatever strategy you're employing, and you always have access to them.
Yeah.
So why do you think we don't see... I don't even know if there is one, but we don't tend to see defense commanders, right? So if we look at the strategy circle, we've got like rush, economy, and defense. Defense being stopping your opponent from winning. So we don't see a lot of commanders that do this, right? I think stacks could fall into this category. So maybe something like Grand Arbiter.
Yeah.
But even then, he's like, stacks has almost completely fallen out of favor at this point.
Yeah, stacks would probably be the closest to interactive. It'd be interesting to see, like, what's it look like when you have an ETB that's essentially a counter target spell, right?
Yeah.
And that's in the command zone. Yeah, like, that's kind of interesting.
It could be good.
You're holding the whole board hostage.
Right.
But I do think it's just because it's, once that's done, then it's done, right? It's not giving this continued value. And we're seeing that in most commander games, because you have to beat 3 other people, you just don't get enough value from this sort of single targeted interaction as opposed to gradual personal generation of value.
Right. And, we've talked before about the difference between like a quality and a quantity strategy in deck building, meaning that quantity cards are, you want like a critical mass of cards that do all the same thing to improve consistency, and quality is individually very powerful cards. Commander lends itself to individually very powerful cards because you can only play one, and everybody has such high life totals that it's hard to get a critical mass of similar cards that do like 3 damage, right, or whatever. And so having access to a commander that is a quality card makes it so that your deck even like mulligans better, right? Like you can mulligan down, like let's say you're playing Timna Crom, you have 2 different card draw engines in your command zone. So mulliganing down to just the mana to cast your commanders can get you back into the game because they can draw you back into the game. The reason why Timna Crom is the best deck is not necessarily because they're in the best colors. It's just because they are the 2 best card draw engines in the command zone.
Yeah, that are just guaranteed.
It's tough. It's tough because it's like, how do you combat this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think as we see more games adopt this idea of a commander, I think, and honestly, it makes a certain amount of sense. It gives you a character to latch on to. It gives you a personality for players to associate themselves with. It's great for marketing, but I do worry that it's not great for game design.
There's a lot of problems with it. I mean, like we're talking about the consistency. I don't necessarily know if it's a problem as much as it's just something that people have to be really, really, really careful with. Yeah. And I think that, kind of what we're pointing out is that, like, I think that as long as you don't push some of the barriers of these individual cards that much, then, hopefully you can try and find balance, right? A lot of these creatures that were designed, that are used in Commander, were not initially intended to be in Commander. Or when they were designed, it was more of, haha, Commander is a casual format. This is just a fun side thing, not, oh no, this is the primary way that we make money now. Now we have to start actually taking it seriously because, oops, we designed Nadu and people are freaking out. But like, I think that, a way of sort of circumventing that is like making sure that if the primary things are card draw, mana advantage, or in other card games, resource advantage, or it's a win condition, is just making sure that any one commander isn't doing more than any one of those things.
Yeah, because we, especially when we look at something like Kinnan, right? Like Kinnan is all 3 of these.
All 3,
right?
Yeah.
Like Kinnan draws you cards by putting cards directly into play off the top of your deck. Kinnan helps produce lots and lots of mana, and then in combination with Basalt Monolith gives you infinite mana, but then also you can use their ability a million times and flip all the creatures off out of your deck onto the battlefield. So Kinnan, I think, is interesting because it's one of the only commanders who can stand toe-to-toe with these partner commanders.
And right? I think it's also interesting because Kinnan is a win condition, Timna and Crom aren't usually win conditions.
No.
They're considered card draw.
Yeah.
But because Kinnan is a lot more likely to be countered when coming out from the command zone.
Definitely draws more attention. I mean, that is weird, though. Like, Timna Crom either one should draw quite a bit of attention when it hits the board, but you're right. They seem to be able to just sort of
technically don't win you the game.
Right. They don't win you the game. I think, for other games, like if we want to talk about design lessons here, right? And I agree with you what you were saying about there's definitely a level of care that needs to happen here, and you need to make sure that you're designing any kind of card that players have access to, like at any point in time,
Yeah.
your window of taking a card from like good to broken is so much smaller because that card's always available.
Yeah.
And so if any of these become too powerful, you end up in a place where, well, every player that wants to play it can always play it.
Yeah.
And you end up with something like what's happening with CEDH, which is that Tymnocrom is just far and away the best deck, and nothing's even really close when we actually look at the tournament results numbers. CEDH is a bit of a one deck format right now, theoretically. Like, a lot of people are playing a lot of different stuff, but if you're playing, optimally, you're probably just playing Tymnocrom. And so when we look at these other games, there's not a lot of leeway for making mistakes with cards that are always available.
Yeah, I as a one caveat to this, and I think that maybe Riftbound is a recent game that's going to be coming out that might be doing this. I think it's called Riftbound, the League of Legends card game.
Sure.
Okay.
I don't remember what the name is. Too generic.
We're not going to look it up.
Nope.
But I believe it's similar to Legends of Runeterra, which is that you do have a character that I think is persistent in Riftbound, but you get spell cards related to that character. Those are shuffled in. That's
in Runeterra.
In Runeterra, but also in Riftbound.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I believe,
Right.
if it's similar to Runeterra. And so that is one way that you can actually circumvent this, is by, you do have this sort of set commander, you have the set character card that is an embodiment of your deck, but you are creating variants or adding variants to running into it by having it actually still be a part of the deck, as opposed to something you just can consistently go and grab from.
Yeah, that's interesting. I definitely think that, somehow subjecting your commander to the variants of your deck makes a lot of sense. And if you're sort of like putting their abilities or something into the deck, and then they're just there and you can power them up as the game goes on, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's just not as flashy. People love having their character there.
Yeah, I mean, look, we can also talk about the fact that, like, when your commander dies, it goes back to the command zone, so you can play it again. Like, that's also problematic because it can just keep coming back. Like, I don't know. It's tough. I do think that a lot of commander systems were designed with the idea of casual play in mind, but because of that, they end up sort of being more easily exploited for competitive.
Yeah.
And so as, more players start playing commander, they want to be playing to the extremes of the system. You start to get a critical mass of players that all want to do that. Suddenly you have CEDH, and then here we are with a format that wasn't really built to be played that way, being played that way.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I could see them potentially making changes to how commanders work in the future because of it. I could see them banning partners, potentially.
I definitely think
we'll
banning
see.
partners is something that I get why they're not looking at it currently, but if Wizards ever brings enough attention to CEDH, I think that's probably the thing that they would do. They've already done it with companions and knocked a lot of companions out, and I think that they can definitely see. I think even Mark Rosewater's come out and said that, like, they regret making partners when they did. So I would not be surprised to see that be something that they tackle. So there's two other types of kind of card types that a commander could be, basically. But it's not one that we really see a lot of at a high level of play. And those are, we call them enablers and enhancers.
Yeah, this is also something that I think casual commander players love, because it's sort of like a commander that is, like, it makes your deck work. Like, it's in play. This is an enabler, right? Is that it's in play, and suddenly, oh, my deck works now. But if it's not in play, my deck doesn't really work, right? It's problematic. And then enhancers are just, my deck does the same thing it's trying to do, but much better.
Teysa is a good example of an enhancer, right?
Yeah.
So it's already death triggers that you're going off of, right? But if something were to be triggered, that thing triggers a second time when you have Teysa out on the field.
Yeah, and really the big problem with these cards is that when they come into play, they don't really do anything on their own, right?
Yeah.
They sort of just, you spend a bunch of mana on them, they come into play, and then they sit there until your next turn, well, then you can play something else to actually make them do something.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of why we don't really see them that much. It's
Not
like
a high level play.
If you don't get any sort of immediate value, or at least possibility of value by getting your commander out, you're already missing out on a lot of opportunity. And on top of that, it's not really your commander that's providing value. It's your commander plus one of these other cards as well.
What happens if you don't have those other cards? What happens? There's a lot of factors that can go wrong in that situation, rather than your commander itself being some kind of an engine for value of either mana or card draw.
Now, that's not to say that other games couldn't have cards like this, but chances are it's probably not going to be as efficient as these other cards. It might also depend a little bit more on what their ecosystem looks like. Right now, at our highest level of play in CEDH, it's incredibly fast. So yeah, there's no reason that you would want to have a commander out that's just going to like not even potentially make it through the full round. Yeah. But if it were slower, then that might actually potentially be worth the additional value that you could accrue. Yeah. But it's hard to say.
Or that the payoff is so good. I mean, you could kind of see like, you know, win condition commanders through this lens a bit,
sure.
Right? In that, like, they're enabling a win condition strategy. So, like, something like Tivit, you have to have Tivit and Time Sieve. If you don't have, like, Tivit on his own is still, like, a lot of value, which is nice. But if it wasn't, then I think it probably wouldn't really be seeing as much play at competitive level.
It's same with Kinnan, right? It's like if Kinnan didn't have his first ability of the extra mana or whatever, would Kinnan really see play?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah. I guess to sum things up, you know, if you're designing a game that is using something like commanders, think about that, where they fit in on the strategy circle, and make sure they're basically only fulfilling one of these criteria, and the rest of the deck needs to sort of be built around that idea rather than them being able to kind of do everything. And also be very careful with card advantage.
If you enjoyed listening to us talk about what all the best commanders have in common, please feel free to give us a little like and a subscribe, maybe a comment down below.
Also, if you're interested in continuing the discussion, you can join our Discord. You can find a link in the description. Also, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
If you enjoyed listening to us talk about commanders and why...
what all the best commanders have in common.
If you enjoyed listening to us talk about... What?
What all the best commanders have in common.
If you enjoyed listening to us talk about... Why can't I do this?
I don't know.
Enjoy listening to us talk about what all the best Jesus.